Hey everyone, it's so good to see you. Gnomes was just telling us about her first stand-up gig. It was...
Not in comedy.
There's another kind of stand-up, means something else in TV. Thanks everyone for coming today. It's so good to see you all out today. We're on week 4 of our series. I'm really looking forward to today. And we'll talk about that, what we're talking about, in a sec. But I just wanted to introduce Naomi Giles, if you don't know. Can I have a big round of applause for Gnomes, who's joining us today. She's the senior team leader here, ministry team leader here at Nations Art. So this is her place where she's generously opened for us to do this here. And she'll be hosting for us today. She's got a background in journalism, so stand-up just means talking to camera. It doesn't mean...
No comedy.
No gags, no gags. But she may tell a few gags today if we can draw that out of her. Terrific. So yeah, we might just kick off. I might just get you to start and we'll go from there.
Well, this whole area of forgiveness, guys, is pretty hard issue for most people. Like, I think it's something that is universal.
Yeah.
And so you've had a couple of weeks now where you've been exploring aspects of what it all means.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit of a recap on what you did last week for everyone.
Yeah, so last week we talked about anger. Anger was like our big recurring kind of theme that we sort of dealt with, because obviously forgiveness issues do bring up all this kind of, anger. And often we conflate doing angry things, throwing plates, smashing stuff, with actually the feeling of anger. And last week we sort of did a bit around
Separated
that. Yeah. Yeah, what other stuff did we talk about?
Oh, well, we talked about the fact that anger itself is morally neutral like every other emotion. The behaviours that follow afterwards might be more or less consistent with your values, but just to feel it isn't a sin. So we talked about that. We talked about put up the feelings wheel, which is that really colourful rainbow wheel with all the different emotion words on it.
Yeah.
And we talked about if you're I'm a Christian, I don't do anger person. Maybe you do.
Yeah, that was cool.
Because a lot of things fall under that wheel, which are sort of anger in disguise, like resentment or frustration or things like that. What else?
Yeah, that was super cool. That was actually really good. And we also talked about how, anger and forgiveness and justice and all of those things can be happening like at the same time. So one doesn't preclude the other. So we can be angry and we can forgive and we can, work towards justice, and all of those things can coexist. It's not like it's one or the other. So that was really helpful. And boundaries. We talked about we revisited boundaries as well. Like that can play a part here as well. So that was really cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. So everything's up on YouTube if you missed last week or any of the weeks before. If you go to our website on the Sorry Not Sorry page, all of the YouTubes are there. So, and we'll keep adding to them along with the notes that we are reading here today and any other resources that we have that we use in the week. That's good.
Okay, sounds good, guys. And this week we're turning our focus somewhere else, away from those issues. What are we looking at today?
We did a lot of work last week on feelings, and this week we're talking more about thoughts. Because what can happen, with really emotionally intense kind of topics like forgiveness, is that we can start to ruminate or really overthink, and these thoughts tend to be sticky. They kind of catch and they get in a loop and we hear them over and over again and we can't get free of them. And we try all sorts of things, to try and get rid of them, deal with them.
Yeah.
Today we're going to be giving you a couple of practical strategies and just reflecting a little bit as well on what do we do when the thoughts show up.
Definitely. I mean, we've all been through those scenarios where you're awake at 2 a.m. and playing over scenarios again and again and again and again. We often don't have practical strategies for how to deal with that. And sometimes we just try and abstract that to say, well, we'll just move on or whatever, but it's not like that. You need some skills to actually unpack that. So we're going to talk about some of that today. And also some of the unhelpful things we try. Yeah.
Well, I think it's a really common experience when you talk to people about, I tossed and turned last night.
Yeah.
Couldn't get to sleep. Often we find that's a real struggle at a time when those sorts of things surface as we try to enter into rest for the night. Something shows up, and whether it's straight away and you can't get to sleep, or you're up at 2 o'clock and then that's it.
That's it.
Yeah, it's a real struggle for people, isn't it?
It's a massive deal, and there's so little strategy or helpful stuff we're offered about that. So hopefully we can dive into some of that today.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Okay, so let's get into that, and I guess we'd like to have a solution to that kind. We do get stuck in thought patterns. So what would you say to someone that just says, I can't get this out of my head?
I think the first thing I would say to them is along the lines of, well, that's actually normal. That's what brains do. The brain's job is, to try and keep you alive, keep you safe. So when something happens that's not ideal, it's problem solving or it's trying to help. But sometimes it's not helpful. At 2 a.m. when it's throwing up all sorts of ideas or hooking you on an idea and you just can't let it go. So your brain is not out to stab you, your brain is your friend. But sometimes it gets a little bit stuck and that's very frustrating. So yes, which is what we're talking about.
It's nice to know that that's normal.
It is.
I think when you're stuck in it, you really feel very powerless.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And it can just be such a draining thing as well, right? Like it's just, I don't know.
And pointless.
Pointless.
You're like, I could be having some great sleep, but here I am.
That's
problem solve.
That's right.
I'm not thinking straight, but I'm still doing it and I can't stop doing it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a good lead on to what we're about to talk about next is obviously when we're experiencing something like that, it's distressing. We don't like it. So we try to get rid of the thoughts. And sometimes the harder we push, the more we fight to get rid of the thoughts, the bigger they get, the more they amp up. So, we have been reflecting a little bit on the last few weeks on let's perhaps think about a different way.
Yeah.
But getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
So,
That's good.
yeah. So
the things that we try to do, and you just mentioned one there, to try and help us. So got this thought, it won't go away, still in the morning.
Yeah.
And try and push it away.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So let's just go through a few different things, top things that people do, all of us do just in our efforts to get rid of those thoughts, which sometimes exacerbate it rather than making them go away, which is what we're trying to do, understandably, because we don't like them. I think a common one is that we ignore it, pretend it's not there, just shove it under the carpet. That's a very different thing to kind of opening up and accepting it. We try to talk ourselves out of it, pretend it's not happening, sometimes even doing religious things like, praying or reading the Bible, but doing it in a way which isn't actually trying to facilitate connection with God, but just, if I only prayed enough or, did that sort of thing, I wouldn't be dealing with this, and then we can get hooked on those kind of thoughts as well, like, I'm not doing it right, I need to do it a bit more, or the reason I'm suffering is because I didn't do it enough.
Yeah.
So that can all escalate or exacerbate things.
That kind of avoidance or distraction are like two power plays.
So there's prayer, which is usually a positive thing.
Usually.
In a negative way.
Yeah. It can
I think I don't want to be misunderstood, and maybe you can weigh in on this, Glenn, but I think, if we are praying for connection, then that's one thing. And yielding in that process. But if we're praying out of guilt or out of ritual or, that can almost be like a thing we're doing to distract ourselves rather than to connect.
Yeah. So I think she's talking about how we can maybe have this approach to prayer. If I pray lots and lots and lots of times, it'll stop or whatever, that kind of penance.
Almost like a magic formula.
Yeah, a spell.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
And of course we do all sorts of non-religious things like that as well to try and get away or outrun the thoughts.
Yeah.
To numb or, just all sorts of...
Or binging streaming or whatever we want to do just to distract ourselves, take our mind off it and, try not to think about it. And I think sometimes in the faith space, like people try and take every thought captive, but they've never really been taught how to do that. So they try and do it by just suppressing the thought or, that kind of thing. Whereas I think I've found a much more helpful way to think about taking every thought captive is actually, we have to actually notice the thought first, and you have to engage with the thought. You have to domesticate the wild thought so that it's no longer wild and recognise it for what it is, that it's just a thought. And we'll come back to that a little bit later on. But certainly that idea of suppressing or avoiding it doesn't work. It's our go-to strategy and it simply doesn't work. Yeah. I mean, that said, binging Netflix till you pass out will work, right? But like, it's obviously not a scalable strategy for dealing with a problem over time.
No. I guess I've noticed in my own experience of being struck that these things, it won't necessarily go away. Like, it could be turn into a bit of a pattern.
Yeah.
Nightly wake up for a period.
Yeah.
Where that becomes a real struggle. And so if you're trying to sort of deal with that with Netflix every time at 2 o'clock in the morning, your life's going to get a bit weird.
Yeah, that's it.
That's right. And yeah, we do talk about things like that, like all of these things are fine in moderation, absolutely. But if you have a toolkit and you have one thing in your toolkit, and it's a hammer, and you're running around hitting everything with a hammer, well, that's going to work for some things, but it's not going to work every time for everything. So sometimes distraction's fine, sometimes doing, numbing out or repetitive things or, things to avoid is fine.
Yeah.
If that's all you have in your toolkit and you are not able to kind of open up and sit in a space where you can tolerate it and face the difficult thing, then that, I guess, is limiting.
Yeah.
And it's exhausting too. Sometimes trying to outrun the thoughts
Yeah.
just makes us tired and they don't go away anyway. They kind of run around the corner and come catch up with us. So, yeah.
Okay, well, there hasn't been a lot of good news.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I guess well, there is. Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to normalise, that this is something that we all deal with a little
everyone's
bit.
Experience,
but the approach we are going with is different to a
Yeah.
lot of the approaches in psychology. So, yeah, there is good news ahead. There's hope. Yes.
So good. Why don't you tell us a bit about that then? Like, people will be keen to have some strategies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
What kind of things?
Yeah. Well,
It won't work.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, you can have them in your toolbox, but you need other things in your toolbox as well. An analogy that's used a lot in acceptance and commitment therapy is of the tug of war with a monster. So if you imagine that all of these thoughts that you have on the other end of, I've got all these things due in the morning and I can't sleep and that sort of thing, they're one end and you're the other end. And you're pulling as hard as you possibly can to try and kind of beat this monster who's got all of the thoughts. And they're pulling, the harder you pull, the harder they pull. So we're just kind of stuck and you're getting tired. And it's like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Well, what about if we tried a different way? What if there was a different approach? And that instead of pulling harder, you drop the rope. So in a way, that means you've lost, that the thoughts have won because the thoughts all come in and that sort of thing. But actually, you're not playing anymore. So you're not invested in winning that fight anymore.
Yeah.
And I guess it's almost like calling their bluff. So, yes, they're there and you're there. You can be there together. And that's, I guess, when you find out that they can't actually do more than be thoughts. They don't actually have any extrinsic power beyond being thoughts.
And that really is the shift, isn't it? The shift is...
Rather than I can't be okay until these thoughts go away, the shift is... I've tried that. I've tried everything I know how to do.
Yeah.
Nothing is making them go away. So I'm going to drop the struggle, drop the rope, and I can be here and the thoughts can be here. But I am not those thoughts and I'm not going to play with them anymore.
Yeah.
They're just going to be floating around doing their thought thing.
Yeah.
And they will come and go.
Yeah.
We are going to practice a couple of strategies around... fostering that or facilitating that, but the goal with these strategies is not for the thoughts to go away.
Yeah.
It's just to separate yourself from the thoughts so you can know that you are not your thoughts.
Yeah.
You're experiencing thoughts.
Yeah.
They're passing visitors. They will go eventually.
I remember speaking to a mentor about this issue once, and the picture he gave me to imagine at the time was that I was surrounded with, I guess, like a force field, and that it was my choice what thoughts I let to come inside and be closer to me. Now, it might not work for everyone, I'm not saying that, but it was just, for me at times, an interesting way of going, I don't have to deal with that right now, I can have that outside there, it's still there,
It can be present, yeah.
But it's not right in my face.
Yeah.
It's not right in my space. And right now while I'm trying to sleep, it's not actually worthy of my attention.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
He should have used that with me, and I found that useful. Maybe some people would find that useful. I'm not.
I think that's a close relative of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So the goal with that is like you've got this thought and it's here and it's like, oh, all I can say, I can't see the world around me. I can't engage with anything. I can't do anything. All I've got is this thought right here. And what you're doing is you're saying, well, okay, I'm going to put it there. I can't make it go away. I'd love to. I've tried. So we know it's there and it's still arcing up and jumping up and down and whatever it's doing. But I'm going to put my energy where it needs to go right now. So
Or just go to sleep.
Yeah, that's right. In that
I think
case.
we talked about sleep before, didn't we? Sleep's a particularly hard one.
Particularly
because,
hard
yeah.
one. I mean,
Yeah.
during the day, you can re-engage with whatever work you're doing. But at 2 o'clock in the morning, there's not a lot on your plate. So,
No, and those information channels are not.
yeah, that's right. That's right. And I think,
These days, you can stream whatever I get.
but just the idea of allowing that thought to be there and knowing that it's different to you, it's separate from you. It's just a thought, and here it is. It's allowed to be there for now. That itself that is worth the whole price of your ticket today, to take that idea away, because that really does come back to this exposure therapy type idea. I think for mine, the idea that
Yep.
the most clinically endorsed theory of all clinically endorsed theories is exposure therapy, which is, if you want to be free of your fear of spiders, hang around a lot of spiders. It will absolutely work. So this is the same time. These big scary thoughts, we hang around them for a whole bunch of time. They're allowed to be here because we recognise that, God loves us in the midst of all this. He holds us in the midst of all this. I am safe in the midst of all this. These are just thoughts here. And then over time they lose their power because they're simply allowed to be there. And I mean, that is just tremendous.
You're sort of almost describing them power if you engage in battle with them.
Yeah.
Then you are, then validating their scariness almost,
Yeah.
if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you're like, you are dangerous and scary and I need to push you away.
Yeah.
And I can't be okay unless you go.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're like, okay, sort of almost like a little kid,
Yep.
pat on the head, and what am I doing? You can be there, I can be there. And my behaviour doesn't need to be... this is not a command.
Yeah.
These thoughts are not commands, they're just thoughts. I don't need to act on them. I have agency over my choice as to whether I act on them or not.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I sort of, as I think about that, I guess I'm thinking about, I want to win,
Yeah, dominate.
I want to, like that word, I want to suppress, I want to defeat,
Yeah.
I want to strike that thing down.
Yeah.
And so that's very strong in us, isn't it, that desire to,
Yeah.
and that means we do start to pick it up and engage with it.
Yeah, pull on the rope.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it pulls straight back. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it is kind of counterintuitive, but it's a different way. And if you've tried so many ways, all the things to try and get rid of the thoughts, and the thoughts haven't gone away, what have you got to lose by trying something a little bit different?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean,
Yeah.
in our story, and sort of from a faith-based, like contemplative prayer traditions that are exactly like this, are thousands of years old, right? People have been sitting with ideas, allowing them to be there, processing them in God's presence, etc., for thousands of years. So it's not like this is a new kind of approach to things,
and
right?
another example I sometimes give with people is of Jesus with Pontius Pilate, and how, he's saying all these things about him, the crowd saying all these things about him, and Jesus just there going, well, that's what you say,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's almost the same with the thoughts, if they're saying, oh, you
Hopeless,
embarrassed yourself, or,
yeah.
that sort of thing. It's, that's what you say, kind
Yeah,
of thing.
yeah.
Which is rather than, no, I'm not, and, giving it energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. So
Hmm.
good.
So the key here is that word acceptance.
I think it is a acceptance practice, yeah. Yeah.
And acceptance, I think you have to know, is actually the thing you're doing. Because people sometimes worry, like, but what should I be doing?
It's like you're giving up.
Yeah, but you're
Yeah.
actually actively allowing that to be there. Like, that is the thing you're doing in response
But in
to
that
this.
act of giving up, you are actually reclaiming power in a counterintuitive kind of a way, because it's like, I'm not relying on you, thought, to be, whether or not you're here, as to whether I can be okay. You can be here or not, you pick.
Yeah.
I could care.
Yeah, for
kind
sure.
of thing, and I can be okay anyway because I'm going to put my energy into doing what matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that sounds good, but it's still hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that there's often parts of us that don't want to go along on that journey. So what do we do if part of us just does not want to stop thinking about this particular thought? There's something we're getting out of this situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And I guess in the context of forgiveness, I think that's a good point, is that someone does something to hurt us, and it kind of feels good to keep replaying it
Yeah.
over and over again, and to try, and again, I think that's our brain trying to be our friend and trying to help us, like just trying to work through all the different scenarios and, what if I could have said this, or maybe I can do this and that sort of thing. But that can become, if that is what we're doing 24/7, we're just replaying that scene kind of over and over our heads, and, revenge fantasies, and talking to anybody who listen about it.
Yeah.
That's satisfying, and it's kind of addictive to engage in those kind of behaviours. But I guess that comes back to workability, like, is that serving you, that kind of behaviour, or is it consuming you and actually taking you further away from the kind of person you want to be and the kind of life you want to live?
Yeah. And so forgiveness is a value for us.
Yeah.
And I would say that it is, if we're trying to be like Jesus, then that's what we need to be moving towards.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit last week about like clean pain and dirty pain, this idea of clean pain and dirty pain. And clean pain is when we do uncomfortable things that move us towards our value. Like, it's hard to do some of these things, but they move us towards the kind of person we want to be.
Can I correct?
Yeah, you can.
Correct,
you can.
but
let's do the dirty pain bit as well.
Sure.
So dirty pain is like we talked about avoidance and all those other things we like. This is another way of coping with the pain that doesn't solve the problem. It just creates more pain, I guess. We talked a little bit about that. Now correct my definition. Yeah.
The concept of clean pain is like we all experience pain in life. That's just, on our time in here in this earth, things happen that are hard and difficult for us and causes pain. And sometimes there is not a lot we can do about that.
Yeah.
There are some things that we can do, but dirty pain is when we kind of stray into this area of trying to run from it, trying to avoid it, trying to fight it, that sort of thing, when it is a thing that we can't control.
So some of these thoughts that keep coming at us, we can't really control.
Yeah.
They enter in uninvited often.
Yeah, so this kind of rumination kind of stuff, or, the
avoidance and
talking to everybody about it to the point that, you're kind of driving people crazy and, that sort of thing. That's keeping it going and making it bigger.
Yeah.
So that's when it strays into dirty pain. Like,
Right.
yes, you've already suffered.
Yeah.
And, that was your fault necessarily and that sort of thing, but you're exacerbating the suffering by keeping it going through this, I need resolution, or I need, this to go away, I need to feel better, I need the thoughts to go.
Yeah.
And it actually is making it bigger.
Yeah. That's good. Super
Does
good.
that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I do think that it's still difficult, but it makes sense because we do get caught, and I know I get caught. These patterns.
Yeah.
I want to fight the thing.
Yeah.
And I also I really have a visual mind, so I love doing the drama in my head of, what happened or didn't happen, or what I'm going to say next.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
You're all tough of that.
One's videographed, beautifully shot.
Yeah, many seasons you can binge. Yeah, that's right.
I don't know, am I alone in this? Because I
No.
very visual mind.
Yeah.
But I find that quite addictive.
Yes.
To go over the conversation, or to go over a conversation I'd like to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, like, I'm not saying don't do that. That's bad, that kind of thing. That is your brain trying to resolve it for you. And, to a point it is fine and maybe helpful, maybe what needs to happen. If you are stuck in a loop, this rumination, that you just never get a break and it's 24/7, that sort of thing, that's exhausting, and that's perhaps starting, the price of that is starting to get high in terms of stopping you from doing other things, or impacting your relationships, or changing you. Like, that's when bitterness and that sort of thing can take hold. So
That's good. That's
Yeah,
good. Yeah, I was
yeah.
thinking of that diagram, but I think you're going to show it later. The one about the thoughts, like I'm having a thought.
I think Leo does
Yeah,
fit in later.
We'll show it later.
Yeah, I think now would be a good time to do the strategy if
Yeah.
people are up for something a bit experiential. So yeah, I say this every week, but this is an invitation. You don't have to participate. You can watch if you want to. Anytime I say anything like, close your eyes, do that if you're comfortable. You don't need to do that if you are not comfortable doing that. But if you would like to participate, this is an exercise called dipping in and out of the river. And it will take a couple of minutes, but it's a good one. So I think
All right.
let's persevere.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So what I would like everybody to do is to try and come up with a really pleasant memory that you've had. And I'm not going to ask you to share it. You don't need to share it with anyone. So whatever you come up with, it's yours. Go nuts. When you've got it, I want you to try and get fully immersed in it. So just recreate it. Go right back into that memory as if you're there right now and just allow yourself to experience it. Allow yourself all of the feelings that come with that memory. If you're a visual person, you might see it playing out. Just really open up. Get lost, fully lost. Just a few more moments, just being fully immersed. Really enjoy it. And now we're going to stop. And just in your own mind, I want you to say to yourself, I'm in my head. And what I would normally say if I was working with one person is, would you like to go back into that memory or would you like to move on? Because it is a choice. We've done the circuit breaker thing of stopping. And you can go back into that memory if you want to, or we can move on. But because there's lots of us and we'd all have different answers, I'm going to make that choice that we move on. So what I want you to do now is just come back into the room. Just ground yourself by using your senses. So maybe put your feet flat on the floor, wiggle your toes, take a couple of breaths. Just notice any sounds that you can hear around the room. Notice where you are, anything you can see. All right, now we're going to do part 2. So it's the same thing, but this time I'm going to ask you to think about a difficult memory which you've experienced and one that you get hooked by a lot. So it might be on this issue of forgiveness. It might be a person who has wronged you or just something that is really quite painful for you to feel. And obviously use your judgment about, something that is you're able to tolerate in an exercise, in a building right now, but something that does have a little bit of emotional punch to it. And when you get that memory, same thing, I want you to fully immerse yourself in it. So just enliven that memory as if you're right there. If you're a visual person, what can you see? What happened? What are you feeling? Just allow yourself to get right into it. Okay, and now I'm just going to ask you to stop and again say to yourself, I'm in my head. What would you like to do? Would you like to go back into that memory? Is there a little bit more ruminating that you would like to do? Or would you like to move on? And again, because this is a bit of an artificial situation, I'm going to make the choice that we move on. But that is a legitimate, choice that you have. If you want to, you can. Give it another couple of minutes. I'm not quite done watching season 9 of that thing that person did. or I'm going to make the choice to move on. Now, moving on, just to be clear, doesn't mean that the thoughts and the images and the feelings necessarily have to go away. But it does mean that we're not going to give them energy anymore. So again, I'll get everybody to ground themselves. Make sure your feet are flat on the floor. Just notice the feeling of the floor beneath them. Try and press perhaps a little bit harder. Wiggle your toes. Notice what your body feels like in the chair. Maybe wiggle your shoulders a little bit. Take a couple of breaths. Pick out 3 things you can hear, either inside or outside the building. Now open your eyes. Pick out 4 things you can see. And I'm going to ask you just to reflect now. If you think about the drop anchor strategy, those people who've been here for the last few weeks, we're at the E now, we're at the engage. So where are you? So you're here in a church. You come to a series on forgiveness. That's probably a value for you. You know, you're listening to a few speakers. That's what matters. So yes, these old things happened. And yes, these thoughts and feelings will come back. And they can still be there and they may still be there. But now that you've regrouped and grounded yourself, just put your focus back into the room and perhaps back onto the panel here. And just be fully present and put your energy there. And then we'll wrap up the exercise there. So.
Oh, that's a pretty powerful little operation there.
I liked the first bit better.
Yeah,
I get that a lot.
I like when we did the hard memory and she goes, if you want to stay here, you can stay here. I'm like, who wants to stay here? I'm good.
Yeah, I can move on. I'm ready. I guess one of the things, Kylie, that I kind of, an illusion I have about myself is that I don't have really bad thoughts, but I know that I do. I have a shadow side that entertains, ugly things at times. So what do you do if the thoughts that you're stuck in are actually really, really quite ugly, horrible, quite bad thoughts?
Okay, so now might be a good time to put up that other slide.
Oh, great, yeah. So Oz, there's a PowerPoint slide which has got that's it, a thoughtception.
Yeah. So this, I'm not good enough thought. Everybody, I'm going to argue everybody gets that thought. And the strategy here is just around, again, you are not that thought. That thought is not a fact. That thought is a passing visitor. It's something that you are, it's popped into your head. You didn't invite it, more than likely. But what happens is we get quite fused to those thoughts and we do relate to them as if they are facts or as if they are, as if we are that thought. The I'm not good enough thought, that must be true of me. If we can kind of practice distancing ourselves from our thoughts, and this is a fairly simple one, by just saying, I'm having that thought again, the I'm not good enough thought. And then you could even do another layer of, I'm noticing I'm having that thought, the I'm not good enough thought. So that takes a little bit of the sting out of it, and it creates separation, that I'm me and I'm a separate thing to that thought. That thought is visiting me. It's not in me, it's not part of me, and it's certainly not a fact. That can be used with any thought, including ones that are really ugly. I don't know whether you wanted to give an example or...
you could give an
does
example.
That principle kind of...
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's a terrible thing to ask you, isn't it? Yeah, no, you
Yeah,
don't have to.
yeah.
Yeah, so...
I don't know. I think you do entertain thoughts, and you could entertain the thought of wanting to harm.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
actually,
yeah.
just, yeah. at the same time had that thought. Yeah. So, are you thinking like
teenager? I used to,
right?
hit my sibling sometimes.
Yeah.
Saying I did it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
As an adult and as someone that's trying to be,
More Jesus looking.
well, maybe. So, I try not to go around hitting people, but there's still that sense sometimes of wanting to do something, and it might not be hitting, but there's other ways.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I think can I use the whiteboard?
Yeah, you can.
Because I know we did this last week, but there's a few people not here last week, so it's worth repeating because it's a goodie. I'm thinking about the choice point here. Okay. So just to recap, all day, every day, we have lots of choices that we, can make. Some of them are big decisions that we have to make. Some of them are not really of any consequence. Some of them are of massive consequence. Some of them are in the middle. And every choice that we make is either going to take us further away from the kind of person we want to be or the kind of life we want to live, or it's going to take us further towards the kind of person we want to be, the kind of life we want to live. And whether or not these choices take us further away or towards, our values inform that. And as we were saying last week, like when life is going all peachy and, things are easy, then it's easy to make towards moves. Why would I not do that? Why would I not make values consistent choices? But when our emotions get in the way and when thoughts like these kind of thoughts hook us and we get, preoccupied with them, they start to pull us back in this direction. So to use that example of, I really want to hurt them. Like I really want to get back at them. I really want revenge on them. The skill is to be able to take one step back, like this person up here, and go, I'm having a thought that I want to hurt them. I'm not that thought. That thought doesn't have agency to make me hurt them. It's just a thought, doesn't have power of its own. It would feel good to hurt them, but it would actually take me further away from my values, which is to be, to resolve things in other ways, perhaps. So my thoughts and feelings might lead me astray sometimes, but if I can kind of take a breath, take a step out of it, I'm having the I want to hurt them thought, and then ground yourself, do what you need to do to settle yourself down so you're back. Remember we did this brain thing here? So do you want me to recap that thing here? So yeah, if this is your thinking, reasoning brain up here and here's your emotion brain down here, and when everyone's calm and those guys are working together and it's all very integrated, then we function well, we make good decisions. But when emotions are running high, we flip our lids and this thinking, reasoning part of our brain is offline. We don't make good decisions because emotions by themselves don't do a great job with that. So by using a strategy like taking breath, grounding, using your senses, going for a walk, having a drink, and then using something like maybe I'm having that thought again that I want to hurt them, slowly, prefrontal cortex coming back online, thinking brain and feeling brain are working together again, and that's when you can have a better shot of making a values-informed decision rather than a reactive, emotion-driven decision. So that's why these sorts of things, they look sort of simple and maybe a bit naff, but they are really helpful because they are distinguishing you from the thoughts and the feelings that you have. You are not those things, and those things don't have power to make you behave in a way that's contrary to your values. You've got agency over your choices, but the skill is to kind of ground yourself and notice your thoughts and feelings rather than be fused to them and let them push you around. The goal is not to get rid of them. They help us. But we make better decisions than they do, kind of on their own.
Yeah, we had a good chat about this last week in anger.
We did, but it's worth repeating.
I know. I think I'm glad you covered it again.
Yeah.
Because we said that anger is such a gift because it tells us, hey, something's being violated that's really important here. but anger is a terrible strategic planner. Like in terms of actually doing something about that, anger is really not the go-to friend for making that happen. That's when the kind of, you need the brain bit. Yeah, this bit's not so great.
The reactivity is high,
Yeah.
responsiveness is low because you're just caught in that kind of, I've got to do something.
Do it now. It's hot. It feels hot. Yeah. I need to do
so
something.
creating space. I think we talked about that last time,
Yeah.
even if it's a couple of seconds,
Yeah.
Between reacting will give you a better chance of making a values-informed choice about your behaviour. And these sorts of things can help slow everything down.
Yeah. Even noticing that you're angry right now. Like,
that
is a massive part of the battle.
I'll be pushing that barrow like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
just that naming and noticing.
Yeah.
I'm angry.
Yeah.
Is super helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super good.
And Glenn, how does our faith play into all this? Because, we like to, I guess we have pretty high expectations of ourselves when we're trying to live out that faith. So how does our faith inform us?
Well, in a number of ways. Like, for instance, that, I reckon, is probably secular psychology's take on what discipleship is. Like, it's people that are intent on being like Jesus and systematically and progressively rearranging their life to move toward that end. That's what we are as disciples, right? So, I mean, that to me is terrific. I like my gospel diagram better, but that one's fine too. And, we can use that as well. So that's super good. But I think one thing I wanted to say today, in the context of all of these quite hard things we've talked about, is that we find Jesus as compassionate in the midst of all this. And I think this is really important because sometimes these battles around thoughts or whatever are maybe trying to live a more Christian life or be a more Jesus-following person or whatever, but you have to know that we are beloved daughters and sons, regardless of the thoughts that come and go. So we always have to come back to that idea that Jesus is here and he is compassionate and loving and for us and with us. In fact, that grounding exercise you often talk about, like we said at midnight, we can get lost in these thoughts and we need to sort of come back to the moment, which is Jesus saying, live today. Like, tomorrow's got enough things to worry about. Come back to today. This is where I want you living. This is where salvation is. This is where I am. This is where it's all going down. I mean, I've found that prayer is a terrific way to come back to this moment, to go, hey, Jesus, you are here and I'm here with you. And in fact, one little practice from the early church that I love and teach everywhere is this breath prayer, that every time I breathe in to say, Jesus, you are here. And when I breathe out, I say, and I am here with you. And I'm here with you. Jesus, you are here, and I'm here with you. And just that little prayer, I can pray at 2 a.m. in the morning, and it takes me out of season 9 of Glenn's Revenge plan and back into this moment where I can relax and notice that I'm not my thoughts. I have thoughts, but I don't need to believe everything I think. They can go on. And another thing that I found helpful is any kind of scripture that can bring me back to this moment. So it might be just that scripture we talked about, that Jesus, God says, this is my beloved son, with him I am well pleased. Or this is my daughter, with her I am well pleased. I can come back to that thought at 2 a.m. any night of the week and end up in a happier place. Yeah. So, I mean, these are just really simple parts of our faith that we can apply to these kind of strategies. And they don't have to be super religious. They're very, very applied and practical things that can bring us back to this.
Can I just add something too, just to what you were saying about the self-compassion stuff? And we did touch on this last week too as well, going back to Naomi's thing about, well, what if it's really bad? What if I really want to hurt them? That kind of thing. So I think a lot of the time as Christians, we like to pretend that we don't have those kind of thoughts. That's not us, that's other people. But if this is all happening in a context of not only self-compassion but compassion of Jesus, who is our ultimate model for compassion, then it is safe to be able to take a thought like that to prayer. Yeah. He's not going to strike us if we have that revelation.
So good, right?
That it's safe to do that. Well, then, as we were talking last week, he knows it anyway. Yeah. So,
That's I think super important.
And I think also it's really tempting to look at Bible stories, both Old and New Testament, through rose-coloured glasses. Like, we're always looking for the highlights, and we sometimes gloss over the really huge issues that people put down. Like, it's there in black and white people. The anger, the hatred, the
definitely
the lust, all of the human stuff we suffer with. It's there in the Bible.
And I think if we can't pray those prayers ourselves because we feel they're unsafe, then we can actually just pick up the Bible and Psalm 88 and just pray Psalm 88 and like enter into all of the reality, all of the despondency and the reality of all that's going down. But it's naming real things, and this gets to the heart of great spirituality is
Exactly.
living in reality
and
of
I
that.
think that's what I was getting at the beginning when we opened, and I was saying don't do those kind of lame prayers that are
fake.
socially acceptable
Yeah.
and that sort of thing, just as a way to kind of band-aid it, feel good, I've done my bit, that sort of thing. Do this kind of prayer,
Yes.
which is genuine engagement with, the God of the universe, who's not afraid of it and has answers.
Yeah.
I heard a guy say once that he didn't just pray to be willing to forgive, but he prayed to be willing to be willing to be willing to be willing.
Yeah.
He had to go back a long way to kind of give himself permission to say, this isn't easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to admit that to myself and to you, God, in this safe place. And I'm going to ask you, to just lead me slowly towards that, because I can't, I know I'm not there.
Yeah, and we talked about in week 1, didn't we, about that I want, help me want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's the same thing, isn't it?
For sure.
Yeah.
I think we sometimes undercook the waiting part of this puzzle as well with forgiveness. Like we assume that has to be done now. Let's get the result, let's get the win or whatever. But these are things we have to journey with for a long time. And the Bible is full of people waiting. God is waiting. He's waiting and waiting, and like his beard is so long. And people are waiting. Abraham is waiting, and Noah is waiting, and David is. These are people are waiting. Joseph is waiting. People are waiting for years and years, and Israel is waiting. And everyone is. It's a book, man, full of a lot of white space where not much is happening. And sometimes our journey with forgiveness can be this waiting is such a good thing of letting all those motives get a bit sifted and working out, what am I trying to get life from in the midst of all this? Or maybe those idols need to kind of get swept and I need to recenter on some good things. But the waiting is part of the journey. So let's embrace the waiting.
Yeah, to know it's going to take some time. Another pastor said to me once that he got a letter once that absolutely floored him, like it ripped shreds off him.
Yeah.
And he recounted that it took over a year to forgive that person for writing that letter.
Wow.
And I think that's pretty good timing.
I think that's aggressive timing.
But for him, it was sort of just saying, don't expect that you can just, when something is deeply hurtful, that there's a quick fix.
Yeah.
And that,
And if our hope is in the character of God, I think that's where acceptance and commitment therapy in psychology is misunderstood, and acceptance is not a useful word for some people. It doesn't mean just suck it up and you've got to deal with it, because there's always hope.
Yes.
There is always hope, and God is always at work. This is about us taking a step back. That's not a suck it up message.
No.
That's a let's just play differently message.
Yeah.
So, and this can and will change, and God restores and redeems.
Yeah.
And anything can happen.
Yeah. He's at work
But
in that
it's
whole
about us
process.
playing differently.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Love that.
well, I think we've got any
Yes.
stuff, you guys, but
Fabulous.
time to do a Q&A from people that have come along that